Bienvenue tous. Welcome to Live in Paris, world news and analysis from France 24. I'm Mark Owen. These are the headlines. The EU approves the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine. Shots could be available within a month. This is the fourth vaccine to get a green light in Brussels. International pressure for Ethiopia to pull out of Tigray province. We have a special report amid allegations of war crimes and a humanitarian crisis. Aung San Suu Kyi is facing allegations she took $600,000 in illegal payments as well as 11 kilograms of gold. These the strongest charges yet brought against her by the military junta. And again, there is no evidence. Just a very stern denial from her party. The civilian leader of Myanmar remains under house arrest since February the 1st. This is Live from Paris. Thank you very much for being with us. We start with news on the COVID-19 pandemic and what is being reported as a promising development for Europe this Thursday. The EU approved the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. As well as being just a single-shot vaccination, it's also stored at higher temperatures than its competitors, making it easier to distribute. The trade-off, though, is that it's said to be less effective than the other jabs. Here at France 24, Marios Sophos has this.
Newly approved by the European Union, the vaccine produced by Janssen, the pharmaceutical subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson. Some scientists in the United States say it could prove to be a miracle solution for countries hoping to speed up their vaccination campaigns with just a single injection required to be fully vaccinated.
Welcome. EMA announcement of a positive opinion on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine for use in the European Union. This marks another key step towards ensuring that all citizens can access safe and effective vaccinations as soon as possible.
The other major advantage of the Janssen vaccine is that it's far easier to store than the others on offer. The doses don't need to be stored in ultra-low temperature freezers, just refrigerated. While the vaccine will make logistics simpler for European governments, some are concerned about the effectiveness of the inoculation. The Pfizer vaccine has proved to be 95% effective, followed closely by Moderna's at 94%. Janssen's, on the other hand, is only 66% efficient, which still puts it ahead of the AstraZeneca vaccine at 60%. According to this epidemiologist, though, the newly approved vaccine provides sufficient protection against serious forms of COVID-19.
It's really important for us to prevent severe cases that would require resuscitation. As it stands, the effectiveness is pretty much perfect. It's over 80% effective against serious cases.
The Janssen vaccine has already begun being administered in the United States, and the number of people willing to receive the injection is rising, speeding up the US vaccination campaign by 20%. Johnson & Johnson has told the European Union it was facing supply issues that may complicate plans to deliver 55 million doses of its COVID-19 vaccine to the bloc in the second quarter of the year.
Marios Sophos, our reporter there. Let's get the analysis joined by Dr. Mohammed Munir, virologist from the University of Lancaster, up in the northwest of England, a place I know extremely well. Dr. Munir, always a pleasure to have you on our programme. The EU has approved then this Johnson & Johnson vaccine. In your opinion, how big a development is this?
Well, Mark, thank you very much for having me. I think the major challenge EU has been facing so far is the supply of the vaccine. So any vaccine that is efficacious, more than 60%, is certainly a good addition into the existing portfolio of the vaccine. And as the report indicated, I think the advantage that I can see from the scientific perspective is that this is one of the very few vaccines those being tested by the time new variants were emerging. So, for example, this vaccine have over 50% efficacy against South African variant. So this is one of those a few solutions that could be offered to countries like South Africa, where AstraZeneca did really completely fail. So certainly this vaccine have advantages, not just the supply, but also the nature of the vaccine.
So it's easy to store, perhaps easy to supply because of that. This 66% effectiveness, for you then, that isn't a problem?
No, I don't really think it is a problem because its efficacy against the severe form of the disease is really high. But advantage is that it's a single dose, and although it's a single dose by trial, but if you compare the single dose efficacy compared to other vaccine, it isn't really any different. For example, if we talk about AstraZeneca, the overall vaccine efficacy is around 67% with the double doses. So with this one, I think it's matching with the single dose overall competition among other vaccines.
That sounds promising. It's just over a year since you and I first spoke on this programme, and you warned us about what was the worrying COVID-19 problem becoming a pandemic. And I think you're actually the first person to actually say that on air anywhere. So being the first to have predicted it, do you see now an end in sight? I'm not asking you to get out a crystal ball, but do you think we're now in the beginning of the end? Is there some light at the end of that long tunnel?
Well, thank you much for remembering, Mark, for remembering that statement. I wish I would have been wrong. But I think what we have seen so far is that immense progress with the vaccine development and overall strategies for the control of this infection with the testing and tracing, and also for the therapeutics development. Well, certainly we have the light at the end of the tunnel, but certainly other aspect of this whole scenario is that we still have so much to do. And I think for me at this moment, the most important thing is that we can vaccinate the world in a relatively shorter time. That is the only benefit we have to do, because without having a full vaccination in relatively shorter time, meaning that we are allowing this virus to evolve, and if it carry on evolving, that's going to pose a challenge that we probably wouldn't have the solution for.
Dr. Munir, you mentioned test and trace. I'm not going to ask you about that. That's opening a whole new Pandora's box. I'm coming back to the actual supply of the virus and the availability of the virus. I know the United States is now in the process of stockpiling to immunize America first. That's kind of a Donald Trump phrase which Joe Biden's borrowed for this particular issue. And this behaviour has been kind of copied across the rich nations. Is there more than ever now, do you think, a danger that vaccines are becoming almost geopolitical tools?
I think it is, and it's probably the biggest enemy than the COVID-19 itself, because we do know that this is a transboundary infection, does not really respect the borders. And whenever any infections come into society, like, for example, putting into the perspective, the Kent variant that was first isolated in the UK back in October, now around 65% of infections in France belonging to this new variant. So this is really the nature of the disease, and we should not expect that we are living in an island in a small country. No, until the whole world is not vaccinated, we should not claim any victory, and having a vaccine nationalism is really a big danger. And at the moment, as you know, most of the developing countries have already started vaccinating, and here in the UK, we are certainly the third largest country have the vaccine. Still, more than 100 countries in the world are the one that have not yet received even a single dose. So we can't really claim the victory against this infection until the infection is cleared from the rest of the world.
If you don't mind, I'll ask you your opinion about the AstraZeneca vaccine, which certain states within Europe have decided to stop using, Denmark, Norway, basically deciding after cases of patients who've had the vaccination having blood clots, thrombosis afterwards. The European Medical Agency saying, well, basically there's no proof and the benefits outweigh the possible risks. I just wonder where you stand on the AstraZeneca issue.
Yes, absolutely. You can certainly ask that. I mean, at the moment, we have 30 cases of the blood clot out of the 5 million doses that have been administered in the EU, which mean 1 in 166,000 people. That isn't really any different than the regular blood clotting that could be observed in healthy people. So for me, as it stands now, relatively seems weak link, but that is actually the biological procedure that we already have in place, that whenever there is any concern, the rollout or the trials are paused, independent committees sit on and analyze it before those are resumed. So certainly something that need to be watched in coming days.
Dr. Mohammed Munir, as ever, thank you very much indeed for joining us, virologist from the University of Lancaster up in the northwest of England. Thank you, sir. Pleasure to speak to you. We're, of course, watching all developments on issues regarding the vaccines. The Janssen vaccine becoming the fourth to get a green light from Brussels. Next, disturbing trends. The COVID pandemic in Brazil. Hospitals in the main cities are reaching capacity. But over the past 7 days, Brazil recorded the world's highest COVID-19 death toll. Brazil's 270,000 deaths, that's the grand total so far, is behind only that in the United States in terms of human tragedy.
Long lines snake around the Sao Paulo hospital. Despite a partial lockdown imposed last week in Brazil's biggest city, more than 80% of its ICU beds are occupied, according to the Fiocruz Health Institute, a situation seen in 25 of 27 state capitals. Health officials are once again sounding the alarm.
We are concerned about the situation in Brazil, and it provides a sober reminder of the threat of resurgence. Areas hit hard by the virus in the past are still vulnerable to infection today.
Behind the recent surge, a new variant known as P1. It first became dominant in the Amazonian city of Manaus in January and has since swept across the country. More contagious, preliminary studies also suggest it's capable of reinfecting people who had previously recovered from COVID-19. Amid the surge, some cities and states have imposed localized restrictions. Many hospitals are at breaking point, but President Jair Bolsonaro refuses to implement nationwide measures, defying health officials.
Lockdown policies adopted in the past were only intended to give hospitals more time to procure ICU equipment, such as beds and respirators.
Meanwhile, the government has come under fire for its sluggish vaccination campaign. Only 4% of the population has received its first shot. The virus has killed more than 270,000 people in Brazil, the second highest death toll in the world after the U.S.
Ethiopia's government on Thursday faced mounting pressure to withdraw troops from the northern region of Tigray amid growing reports of war crimes in an embattled area that now faces a humanitarian crisis. Criticism of the conduct of government troops and their allies from neighbouring Eritrea grew after the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken asserted on Wednesday that ethnic cleansing is happening in parts of Tigray.
For the first time, the United States uses the term ethnic cleansing to describe abuses it says happened in Ethiopia's Tigray region. America's top diplomat adds there must be full accountability.
We have, as you know, forces from Eritrea that are there, and we have forces from an adjoining region, Amara, that are there. They need to come out, and a force that will not abuse the human rights of the people of Tigray or commit acts of ethnic cleansing, which we've seen in western Tigray, that has to stop.
The Amhara region, which borders Tigray, denies the charge, calling it propaganda. Ethiopia's national foreign ministry has not responded to France 24's request for comment. But both Ethiopia and Eritrea have already dismissed previous accusations of atrocities. The NGO Amnesty International and the United Nations have alleged war crimes. And then there are the victims themselves.
After 3 days, I crawled out of the forest where they left me by the main road, and people found me and helped me. In our village, many women were raped, including unmarried girls, even a priest's wife.
Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed launched a military operation last November against the local government in Tigray. Despite officially declaring the end of the fighting on December 7th, thousands of displaced people are still crowding camps in Ethiopia and neighboring Sudan. During his hearing, the U.S. Secretary of State also demanded an independent investigation.
Myanmar's military government this Thursday alleged that the deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi had accepted illegal payments. They claimed the civilian leader they've been holding since February the 1st accepted $600,000 as well as 11 kilograms of gold. Her party is denying this. Meanwhile, eyewitnesses say 8 people were killed when security forces opened fire on protests against the military coup. Human rights group Amnesty International is accusing the military of adopting battle tactics against peaceful demonstrators.
Adding to the charges already levelled against her by Myanmar's military junta, ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi now faces accusations of accepting illegal payments of $600,000 and more than 11 kilograms of gold while in government. They're the strongest allegations made by the military since it overthrew Myanmar's top leaders on February the 1st. They all remain under house arrest. Suu Kyi's supporters maintain that all the charges against her are false. Meanwhile, protests against the junta continued on Thursday, with at least 6 people killed in the central town of Maying when security forces fired on demonstrators. Others were reported killed in Mandalay and in Myanmar's biggest city, Yangon.
We protest peacefully, but they crack down on us violently. It's okay, the more they crack down violently, the stronger the revolution is. We've decided we will continue and we will win.
More than 60 anti-coup protesters have been killed in Myanmar since the start of February, and around 2,000 have been detained. Amnesty International accuses the army of adopting battle tactics in its crackdown on protests and said many killings it had documented amounted to extrajudicial executions. A spokesman for the junta said on Thursday that security forces were disciplined and only used force when necessary, adding that the unrest should be of no concern to the international community, though condemnation from around the world continues to mount.
And of course, we're watching all developments for you on the situation in Myanmar. Next, John Kerry has been talking to France 24. The US envoy on the climate's in Paris to mark the return of the United States to the Paris Climate Accords. He spoke at length, of course, with French President Emmanuel Macron on Wednesday about America's commitment and about Joe Biden's desire to have deeper cooperation between the US and the EU on matters environmental. Well, John Kerry spoke to our Green editor, Mairead Dundas.
His job requires him not to sit around and wait for it. It's to help create it. It's to help create something that addresses this challenge. And we will do it in a way that is not Republican or Democrat or liberal or conservative. We'll do it based on the science and on the practical steps that can work for us as a country and for the world. We have to do better than we're doing today. Can we? Absolutely. Can we do it in time to make the difference? That's the test. And we obviously feel a deep responsibility to try to make sure we do.
The Joe Biden's mushier climate, he's been described as. John Kerry speaking to Mairead Dundas. That interview in full, 23:15 Paris time. My seat is booked to watch it.